ShivNarayan.
ShivNarayan.
So to the viewers, my name is Frank Shields, and this is my friend Matthias Simborg, and today we're going to be talking about sound and sound quality, really more so different equipment that you can use that we have come across through the grace of PT. Prashant Trivedi has been a great influence for us to be able to find out ways that we can increase the quality of whatever it is that we're listening to through different instruments, tube amps, old tube radios and whatnot. And P is so kind to gear us or push us toward things that are better, better quality for our senses and things like that. So just to start the conversation off, before I really started getting into exploring this field of different instruments to listen to things through, I heard about it through P, and P had mentioned to me to ask you about it. And so what has been your journey, or how did you get into finding out about these different things?
Yes. Well, I've always been interested in sound as long as I can remember from a young age. And that naturally led me to an interest in different musical instruments and music in general.
Yeah.
So playing in a young age, trying different musical instruments was a thing, and I enjoyed sound and making sounds. So that's like from the beginning steps. But PT really, like when I came across PT and his music and sounds, and he was telling me to like listening it to through a tube radio. That was really when what we were talking about recreation of some sound here.
Right.
So yeah. So that was when I actually came into this thing with tube amplification and how to properly amplify a source sound. And I would like to just speak a little bit about the source sound first. Because I'm no expert in this at all. I'm just like, I'm curious and I'm exploring and I'm trying things out.
Right.
But this is like from the LotusOcean music point of view, like
right.
Amplifying that source, because I want to speak a little bit about the quality of LotusOcean music, of PT's way of expressing himself through sounds, through guitars and through his amplifiers, because he can sound in so many different ways. It's so cool how he always on the spot creates music, sounds, soundscapes, and it's never rehearsed usually for the most part. It's like on the spot creations, and he embeds everything into it. It's not just the sound, he's embedding like sound and light.
Right.
So wherever he is, the environment and the surrounding, he is adding that into his sound. And as we have seen how nature reacts to his music, we have seen in the LotusOcean music videos, and you also, like, we have experienced it live. Like I have played LotusOcean music outside in nature, and I have had rainbows appear. And people are welcome to experiment with it. I welcome people to come when I do things like that. And I said before, usually nature responds, and it does. So yeah, I lost myself here a little bit, but I want to point it down to the source of LotusOcean music, where it's like the super high quality music which PT produces.
Right. Yeah, and so even just an inspiration for this talk was hearing P talk more about it, more elaborately about it, with Julie earlier, and this whole thing with the Shravan conjunction, the importance of listening right now. And so this is a really pertinent topic that P is bringing to our attention, and that he is so kind to guide us toward refining the ways that we can experience better quality things, not only through sound, but P encourages beings to refine the food that you eat, or refine whatever sensory perception that you're going to get, your touch. So, wear clothes with more natural fibers, or, ether is with sound. So increase the quality of sound that you're going to hear.
Yeah.
And so being able to listen to piece music through the proper equipment is going to give more of a depth and a richness that, as he was explaining in the other interview, that the modern day equipment lacks the ability to reproduce the sound as it was originally played and originally intended to be heard. And just the idea of how sound really has the capacity to affect us positively, especially piece music, and it can affect us in many different ways. But to be able to hear it the way that it was intended is important. So as we're talking, I mean, one of the reasons that I wanted to have this conversation was just basically to share our own experience of exploring, starting that little journey of like, okay, well, if I want to hear things in a better way, what do I do first? What are the simple things that we can start to explore? And tube radios, I think is probably one of the easiest ends, or the easiest things that you can find to start to listening to different things through. And like P was saying, you can find them on eBay. You can just search for tube radio. And there's certain things that you want to look for whenever you're getting a tube radio to make it easier to listen to stuff through. So you want to get a radio, this has been my experience, that has a little audio input on the back that you can plug a cord into. And I think the reason they had those was so that people could plug their radio into like a record player or something like that. Because what you'll find is on the radio, and I'll show you an example here. This is a radio that I got. It's like a Zenith. I don't remember the I don't remember the model, but if you look on the back of it, it's got this area where you can plug in, and then there's a switch right there. And right here it says radio, and there it says phono. And so, the power switch, you just turn it on and then you click it over to phono, and that makes it to where whatever sound is coming through is coming through the input that you're putting in. It's a particular kind of cord. Like in America, they're called, I think they're called RCA cords or something like that. And I'll just show, when it's only, I believe I was using the red side. It's one of the sides, but it's a RCA cable to 1/8 inch male plug. And so, this is going to be what's going into your phone, and this is what's going into the radio. And for instance, if you have like an iPhone, you're going to want to get one of these little adapters to be able to plug your phone in.
All tube radios I have found always have some auxiliary inputs, whether it be for the gramophone turntable, tape recorder. They always have some form of auxiliary input. One thing I could mention here is like the tube radios, they are mono sounds, like one channel. And what we're used to are 2 channels, stereo, left and right.
Okay, right.
That is perhaps something secondary thing to go into, because in the beginning, just make it sound, like make it work.
Right, yeah, just listen.
But telling is you might only be listening to one of the channels, like you might only get the left or the right. Sometimes you might be lucky and you can make both go in there.
Right.
And I have actually found the proper way to do it, because you have to merge the left and the right to the signal path. Because even if there are 2 inputs, the one is carrying the signal and the one is carrying only ground. So only one is the signal, because they only use mono.
Right.
but you have to merge left and right, but you don't want them to compete against each other, the electricity.
Right.
So therefore you need to put in resistors before merging them.
Okay.
And that's a little bit secondary, tertiary thing. I wouldn't suggest that to go into that in the beginning. I can help anyone if they're interested, if they're a LotusOcean follower, to help them build a cable like that. Right. Because it's not. I've done it myself, and it works perfectly. It transforms stereo to mono, and it's difficult to find cables like that. So I had to make them myself.
Right. I found one on Amazon. I should have gotten it. It's downstairs, but it's the male 1/8 inch or 3.5 millimeter. Then it goes to a singular RCA plug-in.
Okay.
So those are available. Maybe I can find a link for it and put it in the description below the video.
Yeah.
And so the first step would just be finding a tube radio. And
yes.
In general, like the price range that I've seen for them can be cheaper, but often they'll be like needs repair or you know, obviously with old equipment, you don't really know what's, and if you're just ordering it from eBay, you don't really know other than from what the description of the auction says, like how well it's going to work. But there are places that they sell antique radios that have been like refurbished. That's where I found this one, was a place called Radio Attic. And sometimes, so the price is going to be a little bit more. Usually I've found the common price for tube radios to be between like 150 and 200. And that's for one that's been refurbished, so that you know it's going to work. Like it's not going to be, but they sell them really cheap, especially if it needs to be fixed or something like that. Like more like the $30 to $50 range.
Yes. Yes, it's old equipment, and the components of them are also old, and sometimes they need to be changed. So that's good. But I have bought a lot of old tube radios which haven't been like refurbished or checked by anyone. Right. And I've been lucky so far because all of them have worked perfectly.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Nice.
And I should mention, like most of the radios here in Europe, they're using like banana connectors for their inputs.
Okay.
Yeah.
And maybe you could show us too, because you showed me if you have it handy with you. So for instance, this radio and the radios that you'll find from the States, this is the plug, right? But yeah. In Europe and in other countries, the outlets are different. So you can find adapters, right? Yeah, that's it. So that's,
and the one you use is like this one.
Yeah, it's like that.
These are very hard to get here in Sweden, but I got one.
Is that an adapter to like from?
No, this is just a plug, and you can make your own cable with it.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I'm actually going to use it for a different purpose because I have an old cinema tube radio which uses this as the speaker output because it was carrying high voltage to the speakers. Yeah, it's a special system that use plugs like that. But you were talking about the adapters. Yes, that is like, for instance, I bought one radio from England. It's actually this one standing here, and they have like different plugs, like look like this, but there's adapters which you can, and we have the same voltages here, so it's just plugs like that.
Okay, right.
And you can use it here.
Perfect. Yeah, those
Go ahead.
Little things that you might find that you need wherever you are that you're watching this from, and you find, maybe you find an old radio from America, or like the ones that I was seeing on eBay somewhere from Russia, and so they had different plugs, or from different places. So we'll want to be able to find what we need to be able to make it work wherever we are.
Yes.
And so tube radios are one thing, that we can use. And that's what I've really explored with the most. I've gotten 2 or 3. But so there's some other things that we can start doing that I know that you've had more experience with. One of them being getting a digital to analog converter. So can you just share like what your experience has been like with that?
Well, yes, it really makes a difference. So the digital to analog conversion from your source, which is digital, like on the computer, MP3 or CD, it's all digital today. And somehow that is going to be analog. So there's this conversion happening. And if you're hearing sound, then that sound has gone through a DAC, a digital to analog converter. So your computer has it, your phone has it, because otherwise it couldn't be sound coming out of it. But the thing is, they do them very small and they do them cheaply. So the quality of them is very different. That's why we suggest like buying an external DAC, and they are in all price ranges, because this is a big thing. You want to make, because the digital sound is just zeros and ones, okay? And you want to convert them somehow to something that becomes sound.
Right.
And that's a tough task. And you want to make the zeros and one become really good. And with a good DAC, I'm just beginning to explore this myself, so I can't give a lot of suggestion or like that. But what I can tell, it really makes a difference. You will hear the quality of the instruments. Everything will be more natural. The stage of the sound is coming alive. Like you can separate the instruments. It's richer. It's more natural. It's better quality. So that's a very important thing also, to get a good DAC.
Yeah.
And then nowadays there are some good entry-level DACs, which makes a difference.
Right. And so as far as the cordage and whatnot, so if your source that you're playing from is your computer or your phone, is it going to be a similar, like what plugs into the DAC? Is it an 1/8" cable, or is it a?
They have different types to connect it, like coaxial and USB-C, I think it is.
Okay.
Like I use USB to my computer, for instance.
Okay, yeah.
So they have different ways to connecting the DAC to the device.
Okay, cool.
That's not difficult at all. You just plug it in, and then it will have outputs from there instead.
Yeah.
So it's just something you add.
Right.
It's very
Yeah, totally. There was another thing I was going to mention in terms of being able to play the music through the tube radio, which I just found yesterday. Preparing for this talk, I did a little bit of research, just like, hearing people talk about speakers and tube amps, and but I was looking on eBay to kind of just price like what I'm seeing right now, as far as the radios, and a lot of it was kind of how I mentioned to you, the price range. But they have, you can find on eBay, there's a thing, it's a straight plug-in Bluetooth. So basically this area where you would plug in your cord, they sell it now, I think it's in the US is like $35. You just plug it in and it's connected to this little chip that's a Bluetooth that, is a receiver, and it just connects to whatever device you're playing through. And so that's really simple. As far as like a way that you can connect it to the radio.
Yes, that's very convenient and easy to use. I think though that the Bluetooth is not as high quality, and I'm not sure about this, let me say that, as a connected cable. But
right.
I mean, we need convenience, right? And we need people like easy to do it. So if that works, then fine. And like we suggest, we don't make this complicated. We want to make it easy.
Yeah, just getting the beginning steps.
Yes. So I mean, the most important step first is get a radio. Like we suggest, like an old bulb radio, tube radio from the 50s, 60s, 40s.
Okay. Yeah, and so just the idea of that Bluetooth, I mean, could you plug that into the DAC? as well, and then plug the DAC into the radio?
Oh, that's over my knowledge.
Yeah. We'll have to experiment and see what can happen. And one thing, right? One thing that I was going to mention too is with the old radios that I didn't realize it is very much like a niche market, because they have some of those old radios. They'll go for, I mean, anything that's antique that's been preserved in good condition for that amount of time. Many of these radios are from the 30s, the 40s, and the 50s.
Yes.
You know, they can go for really expensive, but and they have some really interesting styles and ways that they looked from that time. But that's not what necessarily we're looking for. I was just going to mention that because in your search for a radio, you'll see all different types of prices and things like that.
Yeah.
But the cool thing about finding these antique ways to project sound does speak to this. I won't get too much into it, but this Saturnian quality that TT has, as far as like being into these old antique, like these relics from the past, you know, to be able to
yeah, because they have high quality amplification system in them. It's really good stuff in them.
yes.
So the sound, the audio quality, as Pete has mentioned, it was better before. It has been a decline in audio reproduction, like what the masses listen to, because in older times we were recording with tube amplification and on tapes, so
Right.
it was more analog and natural sounding.
Yeah, on the cellular, I like how Pete was mentioning that, how recording onto something that's a natural fiber gives more of the natural sound.
Yes, and it came to my mind right now, so I want to mention that sound is really important. Like sound is in all the elements. Sound carries through all the elements, so it's really affecting everything.
Right.
And it has a big effect on you, the listener, and that is, of course, the quality of sound, and that has to do with how we reproduce the recorded original sound. And of course, the original sound, what we listen to, is of most importance. But we want to take that original sound, which was recorded at some point, and reproduce it in a proper, good way. And that is why we're having this talk. Yeah.
That's right. So moving on, so we mentioned tube radios, and then we mentioned a digital to analog converter. And by the way, before I move on, the idea of being able to get this for yourself it's an investment. And it's an investment that I feel like is really worthwhile. It is something that, you know, we don't have to like get everything at once, but it's something that we can work toward. We can kind of save up a little bit. Like, okay, my next piece of equipment is going to be a DAC, and then after a DAC, maybe I'll try to get some good speakers, and then you know, so it's through time, it's an investment in your well-being, in being able to get a proper sound, and so so going from the DAC. So tube amps are something that P is really into, and that you know, I feel like is going to be more necessary if you have a bigger speakers or something like that. Like for instance, you're not going to plug a tube amp into a tube radio, right? No. So
the tube radio is a tube amp.
It's the tube, right?
Yeah.
But then getting something like a power amp, that's going to be something that you can drive a larger sound system with.
Yes.
So like when he's talking about listening to music through speakers, he suggests getting wooden speakers. And I would imagine, you know, the natural fiber of the wood has a more harmonious resonance than something like a plastic casing on a speaker. wood.
Yeah, and more importantly, also I think he means like the speakers themselves being of paper. So the speakers are actually of a natural material, because today modern speakers are made of all kinds of material.
Right.
And, I think he has said that too, that like go for the paper cone ones, which have paper,
Okay.
because they're gonna push the air.
That's what's
They're
pushing
doing
the
that.
sound.
Yeah.
So as far as your experience with speakers or amps, because I haven't reached that stage yet personally.
That's coming next. Let me tell you, it starts with tube radios, and then
Yeah.
you will be happy with that for, I mean, it's super, it's great. There are some great sounding tube radios out there.
Yeah, it really is.
But then you will want to explore some more, and then that's the next step, to get an actual power amp, which is like tube power amp with speakers. Yeah.
And so what has that been like for you in that, you know, just hearing the sound? I would imagine maybe, so a power amp is able to amplify it more. I mean, so can you hear more sound, or what is it like qualitatively as far as experiencing the sound?
Well, it's both qualitatively, like quality of the sound, because all tube amps, they will sound different, and they then eventually will go into different tubes. What do different tube sounds like, and like that. There's a lot of depth to it.
Yeah.
But the thing with like a power tube amp, which is beside, and you have a speaker system, it's usually about volume and quality, because you're gonna get a lot of more power out of it.
Right.
And he suggested me to find some old PA tube systems, and PA stands for public address, which I use for like concerts or whatever.
Right.
And there are some, if you can find, like they're not expensive, like old tube PAs are excellent start when you go into that area.
And so do you find it on, you can find it online if you just search for that old PA tube amp? Is that what you would look for?
It's funny, I haven't seen them so much lately, but he mentioned it to me, and he suggested it to me, and somehow it just showed up. So,
nice.
So I think if you're looking for it, you will find it eventually. Like,
yeah,
if there's a will, there's a way.
Yeah, the first step is having an awareness about it, right?
Yeah.
And
I mean, there are a lot of tube amps also, like just power amps, tube amps.
Right. Yeah, I mean, one thing, do you know much about what P is speaking about when he's saying, you know, the integrated circuits versus the older ones, which had resistors and capacitors? I mean, basically, from what I could get, he was saying that the integrated circuits is kind of having it smaller, you know, as far as like you're having a more maybe a condensed signal or something that's going through there.
Well, yes, this is beyond my knowledge, but I think like with the IC, they add a lot of things which is not needed, like older amplifications or more simpler pathways. This is, I shouldn't speak about it because I don't know, but I think like, because I think he mentioned that like the IC, they add a lot of, they could add some more hum and add some more noise, and I'm not sure about this.
Yeah.
So I shouldn't speak about it. But I know said like it's better to just use the old simple ones without
the resistors and capacitors.
Yes.
This is you know, it's an exploration that we have gone into a little bit through P's guidance, and so yeah, really just being able to share this, I feel like it's helpful in a way. Like whenever I talked with you and just doing a little bit of research, you know, this is what we've come to find, and we just wanted to be able to share this with some folks. And so, I mean, is there any potential problems do you think that people could run into? Because, for instance, so I'm not sure what's going on with my radio. So, like when I plug my radios into my computer, it makes a loud hum. But when I play it through my phone, the sound is fine. So is there anything that you've run into as far, well, you mentioned that you've had a lot of luck with the radio.
Yeah. Well, that's not some kind of ground issue there, like,
Right.
because it works with one device and the other device it makes a hum. So it shouldn't be like the radio's fault. It's some issue with ground, I believe. And of course, this is old equipment. And as I said, like it's old components, and they, like the capacitors, they can start leaking. And the tubes, of course, they don't last forever. They need to be replaced. But it's quite funny. I have really old vintage gear which haven't changed the tubes and like that, and they still work. So it's quite cool. But of course, they will need eventually you need to change the tubes, for instance. They don't last forever.
Right. Yeah, from whenever I look at the radios that are for sale, the ones that have been refurbished, they're always like all tubes have been checked, because I guess they have like a little device they can connect it to see if the tubes are still functioning properly. So yeah, I mean, is there anything else that you wanted to add in? Like how, I do have a question for you, just from your experience. So when you bring your sound system out into a natural environment, how are you powering that? Are you just using like an extension cord, or do you hook it up to your car or a generator, or how does that work?
Yeah, I have those really nice lithium batteries, which are giving 220 volts. And so they power it, and they can power for quite some good amount. They can power a tube radio for like 4 hours without a problem.
Oh, wow, that's great.
So yeah, that's what I use when I'm outdoors.
Oh, and another thing that maybe you know about it or not. So when you're exploring these different sound devices, or just getting a more quality home entertainment system, so you have this thing that's called a receiver, and then you have this thing that's a preamp. So what are they? Do we need them? Is that part of the equation here?
Well, the preamp, when you have your source signal, it's usually very low signal. So the preamp is amplifying that signal to go into the amp. And that you have to experiment a little bit, because some amps need that amplification. I have used all my tube amps here. I do not use a preamplifier. I only use like one, it's a passive attenuator. They call it a passive preamp, but it's really a potentiometer, like just to control this volume of it.
Okay.
So that is something you have, because that adds color to the sound as well, the preamplifier.
Right.
And sometimes you want that colorization, what it adds, and sometimes you want that pure. If your power amplifier is like can handle that signal, then you might not want to use a preamplifier. So it's from case to case. And also, if you're gonna have a long cord from your sound source, then you're gonna want to have a preamplifier, because then the signal is going through a long path, and then you want to have a strong signal so you don't lose quality. You usually would lose some bass if it's a long cable.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And as far as the source that you're playing from, I mean, obviously we can play it from our phone or your computer. Have you experimented with anything else? Like I have an old computer that can burn CDs, which isn't as good as like a tape or a record, but I can listen to it in my car, which is one other thing. I would imagine you could maybe get one of those power adapters in your car to be able to listen to a tube radio in the car.
Well, yes, that might be possible.
Right.
I know they have made, like earlier, they made actually tube radios in the cars, but I don't think it's that common, because I mean, the tubes get hot and they're microphonic, meaning all like the vibrations is going to affect the sound.
Right.
So like for car use, I don't know, but
Right.
I mean, you can play LotusOcean music on any system. Like if you don't have a tube amp, I mean, play it through a transistor amplifier to begin with,
Mhm.
until you get the tube amplifier, and then you will hear the difference. And you will hear like, I can hear the naturality, the warmth. And that's one thing I remember when I was a kid. My father had an old tube radio in the garage. And I remember listening to that, and it was just radio, but I remember the voices. They felt so warm and like real, and like, and this explained like sitting next to a fireplace kind of feeling through
Right.
sound. And that is a good way of explaining what the tube does. But it does more than that, because it adds richness, and it adds, yeah, it's just another world of sound. It's difficult to describe.
When you first hear P's music through a tube system, my thought was, and I heard even my wife said this, she said, well, you can tell this is like the way that it's meant to be heard, the way that it's meant to be listened to. It's really, it adds another dimension. The warmth for sure is there. And yeah, it's a fun exploration to be able to hear P sounds through the proper amplification, right?
Yes, and your ears are gonna enjoy it. It's very pleasant for the ears.
Yeah.
Like the transistor amplification, it's harsher, it's cooler, it's
Right.
more attacky-ish.
Yeah, it can be kind of real scratchy, and I mean it's all really a lot of treble, just like this high pitch kind of.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
And that it's funny because when you used to tube radios, I usually dial off a little bit of treble when I come to transistor systems, because I found that treble to be a little bit unpleasant. Yeah, sharp.
Yeah.
Too sharp.
Oh yeah, but as far as your source sound, so is there any other ways that you listen to the LotusOcean music other than, just the phone or the computer? I mean, I guess that's pretty much mainly the source that's available to listen to it through right now.
Yeah, I mean, the source are digital. So you listen through your computer, which is digital, or your phone, digital. I mean, if there were tapes, it would be super cool to use like cassette tapes. Like if the original recordings were recorded on tapes and then put onto tapes as well.
Right. Maybe one.
That would be awesome. Like going more in an analog way, like.
Right.
That might be possible in the future. We will see. But right now the source is digital. So we want to use that and make it sound as nice as we can, and make it the proper reproduction of that sound.
Right. Oh, and then one other small question was, so I was looking at some power amps, and I was looking at this one website that looked like a affordable power amp. It was like $200 or something, between $200 and $300, and it had an option when you're buying it, what voltage to get. And so, do you know anything about how to know what kind of voltage you would need for your home, or like, would you
you have to know? Yeah, you have to know your country's voltage they use in the outlet. Yeah.
Okay.
So like here in Europe, it's 220 volts. In America, it's 110.
Okay.
You have to know that, or Google it if you don't know it.
Right. And so if you plug in something that's too much, is that just going to basically just blow the breaker? Or like,
I think so, yes.
It just won't work basically, or something?
Won't work, no. So the fuse is gonna go, or perhaps you might damage the equipment at the worst case.
Right.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, that's good to know, because that's on the list of something to explore in the future for oneself. So yeah, I feel like we covered some good ground today as far as just the beginning steps into getting the proper equipment to listen to P's sounds and anything that you want to listen to. So
yes, so if anyone has a question, like they can feel free to message me, and I will try to help them. And
right.
like the basic suggestion is try to get a tube radio. That is the beginning step.
Yeah.
And listen through that. It's not difficult to find. It's not difficult to make it work. And if you have problems or questions, feel free to ask.
Yeah, and maybe in the underneath the video, I can put links to a couple of places that I've been able to find the radios, and eBay, obviously.
Yes.
Like that. Is that
Yes.
Is that where you've gotten most of your stuff from?
Yeah, we have like in Sweden we have our like eBay kind of service.
Okay. Yeah.
And then you can look for like a Facebook Marketplace or like flea markets.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are good places to search. Even
Yes.
I would even suggest too, I thought about this because my grandparents had a record player that was connected to this kind of, it looked like a big desk, but it had speakers connected to it, you know? And I just thought back, I was like, oh man, that would have been nice to been able to have gotten that or something, right? But even if you have older relatives or family, anyone that you visit sometime, maybe they have some old equipment that it just sits in the corner and they don't use it or something.
Yes, and today people don't know what to do with the tube radios because they're like big and they don't use them anymore. So
Right.
that's why they're available online to purchase on eBay and sites like that.
Right.
So it's nice to cover those topics here about sound quality and being aware and what we listen to and how that affects us. And P.S. made this point very well in his previous current interviews,
Right.
about the source we're listening to. Like we're feeding ourselves on this sound level and it's affecting us. The music we're listening to, the voices we're listening to, whether it be like the mainstream media or whatever, everything we listen to affects us. So that's nice to be aware of that and to really try to make an effort to first choose what to listen to, be aware of it affects you, and also refine your system in which the sound is reproduced.
Yes. Yeah, and I think it's for anyone who's watching this, it's they may already know, but it's the P has such wonderful sounds. It's always safe to be able to listen to LotusOcean tunes, as far as, you know, affecting yourself in a positive way, in a way that it's going to be uplifting. Because very much it's true what you're saying and what P's sharing with us, that you know, our diet is not only what we eat, is anything that comes in to our senses. And so sound very much is affecting us. Like you said, the content of if people are speaking, or people are even just playing through music, the vibrational essence of what state they're in comes through the music. And
Yes.
that's why it's so great to be able to listen to P, who is obviously in a higher being, who is you know, being able to, as he said, give us little glimpses of the heavenly realms through this sound.
Yes, and that's how I find his music. It's like they are portals to other dimensions.
Yeah.
Because they really transfer you, they really uplift you, and they really, and as we have discussed sometime also, that music, like they often is aimed at getting you feel a certain way.
Right.
But Petey's music is not about targeting your feelings in a certain way. They are like above all that. They are like higher than that. Right. So yeah, it takes some time to get used to, because it's gonna be very different from what you're used to.
Right. Yeah, and it's how Pete's mentioned, he's like, it in certain ways, it's not, the sounds that he makes sometimes, it's like, it's not relatable to the feel.
Exactly.
And it's,
That was what I was trying to say. Exactly.
yeah, it's taking us out, it's bringing us up towards something that's beyond what we're used to experiencing here. So
yeah, and it's not only you as a being who gets affected by the sounds of PT. Even nature around you is aware of what is being played, and that might sound crazy for some people to hear that, or they
right.
can't accept that fact, but I'm telling you that is my experience.
Yeah.
And I can only share that experience because I've seen so many responses from nature which are connected to playing PT's LotusOcean's music.
Right. Yeah, nature will respond, and it's not like it's not like we played the music to conjure some type of response, but it is just a natural reaction, and it's yeah, you'll see it can often evoke, you know, things like a rainbow or you know, all different sorts of beautiful clouds or sunsets or sunrises, things like that.
Yeah, and it's so nice because nature is always expressing itself in a new, novel way. You never know, like, how the expression is always new.
Right.
And it's kind of like that with Petey's music as well. Like when he creates, it's always a new composition. It's always a new masterpiece, which is getting created.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Cool. Well, I'll end the recording here, and what we can do is, like you said, if there's anyone who wants to message you questions about the sound equipment, or maybe how to make those particular stereo to mono chords like you were talking about, we can do
Yeah.
that. And then maybe we can also have another talk later on as we explore with different devices, and you know, share more of the experience of what it's like, you know,
Yes.
upgrade
Yes.
these ways
Yes.
of sound. So
I just want to add a final advice, like just
yeah.
keep it simple.
Right.
Just simple, yeah.
Yeah, because there's a lot to go into.
Yes.
You know, because the way that the audio files, like there's some people on YouTube and stuff who are audiophiles, and so they're reviewing all these different types of equipment, and it can get very detailed, which isn't a bad thing, but keeping it simple, I think is, yeah, that's a good point to yeah. Cool. ShivNarayan.
ShivNarayan.